Welcome back, you SHITBOX5 junkies and enthusiasts, to a much overdue episode on the MX5. I've returned from ABCC's Grid Life event. The car did not nuke itself. I did not shear another input shaft. It made it home. It drives perfectly fine. It actually put down what people tell me is a very reasonable time for someone who hasn't driven on track in almost 2 years now, and learning his car all over again. For the first time all year long, the car actually felt fantastic. It felt like it was supposed to. It felt like the car that I originally started driving 3 years ago and absolutely fell in love with on track. Only now it's faster, tighter, and with more downforce, so there's a lot going on there. Oh, that being said, there's still a lot to do, and K-Power now actually has a kit. So, I guess we should discuss that at some point. But first, let's talk about the things that went wrong and right at ABCC and everything going forward. One, surprisingly so, my homemade ITBs that I have 3D printed out of carbon nylon work and work well. I have no clue what the horsepower gain out of these is yet. All I can say though is that the Haltech did request a lot of extra fueling at Watt at some point and kept asking for it throughout the weekend as I kept adjusting the map. So to some extent, this must be pulling a bit more than the K-Power manifold. On top of which, this is also almost 15 pounds lighter than the K-Power manifold, so that's a big win for me there too. I have no clue what the long-term livability of this is though, because as these motors are known for vibrating everything to death. Simple as that. Bosch throttle bodies go to shit. I actually question if my current one is any good. Because this, surprisingly, idles a lot smoother, better, and more consistently than my Bosch and K-Power manifold ever did. Not sure why. My tuner tells me that those Bosch throttle bodies are actually known for just being garbage at the end of the day sometimes. Very plausible. Second thing that went surprisingly well. My homemade carbon Kevlar wing with an ABS core still weighs roughly 10 pounds. Weighs more than my failed wing right here, only because Kevlar requires a lot more resin. That shit soaked it right up. And the sad part is you can't actually sand Kevlar like you can carbon Kevlar or can just carbon fiber. Even when it's been resined and stuff, it'll fray. And I found that out, sadly, the hard way after I cut the wing to shape and then started sanding this, hoping to just smooth all this out and then re-clear it and have it look fantastic. Not the case. All the orange parts starts fraying and balling up like fabric, as you can see here. Overall though, for what I would call a $200 wing investment, I think I'm like $40 in ABS into the print, if even that. The 2 carbon uprights that I made, and the second skin, and my lip, and my splitter that I made, that isn't on the car right now, I think grand total between the 4 parts, wing, uprights, trunk, and splitter, I'm about $1,200 in supply, and I've still got tons of leftover carbon fiber, fabric, granted small pieces, and a good amount of resin. I think for $1,000, if you have the ability to just sit around and you have a 3D printer at home already and all that stuff, this is hard to beat. Because at the end of the day, even to do the uprights and like flat pieces, all you need is a mirror like this and the wax and everything else you're going to buy anyways to skin a trunk if you plan on skinning stuff. Which, if we're going to be fair, this isn't like a proper skin because the metal skin is actually on the trunk still. I just kind of glued this on there because the original trunk was damaged in the corner over there. It is a hail damaged trunk. I was going to cut it off. I didn't really have time. I literally put these parts together the day prior to ABCC. So it took me 2 days to prep everything, set up my workspace, and then 1 full day to carbon wrap the wing, create the uprights, and do the trunk. It's a lot of prep and work, but if you have the time to spare, it's not a bad way to go about it. You learn a lot, and honestly, I like learning stuff, and I like learning how to do cool things. I just like building things. Maybe you're the same way. If you're not, hey, spending money on a wing, perfectly fine too. Time money management kind of deal. You decide on what your time and money is worth. But this went very well. The car has never gone around corners that grippy at those speeds, so I'm super happy with that. Surprisingly, the other thing that's going well so far is that my Chinesium knockoff water pump is working way better than that Pureberg that took a shit with less than 1,000 miles on the motor. Not sure why it did, not sure why it seized. Maybe it was cavitation, maybe it was whatever. Maybe Pureberg's just a garbage company. Doesn't really matter. But this one works on PWM and flows 400 liters per hour. So it's great. Kept this motor cool. Keeps it a little too cool if you're just driving around in the street. So I've had to mess with my map a bit, and it seems to be a lot better now. My dry sump. What a journey it has been with this thing from year 1 to now. Learning everything that I did and having to remake lines and put support coils inside the AN lines and whatnot, and also get a vacuum regulator so that I'm not sucking main seals into the pan was a big learning process. So if this video does anything and you are inspired to do the same, because you have to remember, I picked up that pump for $350. I did a lot of mental gymnastics to justify everything else, because the tank itself in the rear was about $600, another $150 for the catch can for it, and then a couple of hundred or so in lines and whatnot too. I think if I were to really tally it up, I think I'm probably under 2,500, and that's with rebuilt, also sending the pump out to get rebuilt at some point, which cost me about another 350. I think I'm still under $2,000 on a dry sump pump. And in my opinion, that's kind of worth it because there are 0 oil pressure issues. This thing holds above 90 PSI all the way to red line. It'll hold 100 at some point, like when the oil is cooler, but it works well. I still haven't gone and done a dyno since my failure dyno right before Midwest Fest, where I only got 181 horses out of it. That was another thing. Wiring harness. In this car is a massive learning curve to me. Most of what I've done in here, I've literally never done before, besides, swapping a motor in a car that does belong. I've never gone through this extent to build something, and that's a lot of what this project was about. This was an ego build. I had to know if I could do it. I needed to know. The wiring harness, I resolved the issue. If you're going to learn anything, there's one thing I'm going to preface the wiring harness with. 12-volt line to coils. When I originally went on a harness building Facebook group that is actually very knowledgeable and everyone there is super friendly, there was a miscommunication. I asked if 20 gauge wire was enough as a 12-volt source to the coils. I think I never specified that I was only going to run one 20 gauge wire and then split it to 4 20 gauge wires up here. That did not allow for enough current. I went ahead and did a little overkill and used a 16 gauge Tefsel wire and rewired all this. And then also, just in case, used 18 gauge ground wires and grounded them to the head rather than having them be in the harness somewhere and then grounding somewhere in the chassis through the harness. I gave them their own ground. Originally it was also a single 20 gauge that I split all the grounds into with this one right here. I don't think that was helping the situation. And which was probably causing my massive misfires above $5,000 according to the dyno and my tuner. Ever since I had fixed that, the Haltech demanded more fuel, and it ran a lot smoother, and it felt like it was holding power to 8,500 RPM. So I'm pretty happy about that. Let that be known. If you're going to undertake making a harness, I suggest just using a single 16 gauge wire depending on where you're getting sourcing, and then if you're just going to split that, go ahead and do a 16 and then split to 20. People said 18 is enough, but you know what? Overkill, underkill, I'd rather just overkill it at that point. The wire price was pennies of difference per foot, so I might as well just overkill. It's not that much heavier since it's Tefzel, and it's not all that much bigger because it's Tefzel. So let that be known. The biggest thing for me to find out this year, though, was things with the Haltech and the CAN bus system with the MX5. What they don't end up telling you at Haltech is that the profiles they have on hand for the MX5, they're not complete. They work, but they're not complete. My car is not a PRHT, but it's a Grand Touring, and it has DSC and ABS and all that stuff. The profile I attempted to use last year for like over 2 weeks did not work. I would put in DSC profile, and my traction control light was on, my DSC, my ABS light lit up, and I never had a tach or a speedo or any of that stuff, and ABS did not work. So I finally decided to switch over and just wing it and try the NC non-DSC profile. And this was with many conversations with Haltech. They're not always fantastic on communication. I kept asking them, hey, could it be the profile? Is it this? I don't know what's going on, and so on and so forth. So after a bit of digging around and simply using the non-DSC profile, my ABS light went away, my DSC light went away, and the only thing I have on is a traction control light, which doesn't matter because I don't use TCS in this car anyways. But Haltech does have that ability, and I don't really care for it. Yeah, also, fuel gauge. Now that K-Power is doing all these and other people are using Haltech to run CAN bus in the car and get their K-swaps running, a lot of people are verifying that your fuel gauge will not work correctly anymore. And Haltech keeps telling us it's not on the CAN bus. It is. It must be. There's no way it's not part of the CAN bus programming because it does not work anymore. It works just fine if you go back to the stock ECU, I'm sure of it. And that's why I had to install this aftermarket fuel gauge that isn't the most reliable, but it's better than what that would read, which is stops reading just above half a tank or something like that, and then you're just left scratching your head wondering how much fuel you got left. And this isn't that accurate either, because the resistor on the fuel on the fuel float has a weird ohm reading, so it's not like one of those universal like 33 to like 190 or whatever. It's, I want to say, I had it written down, but it's like 30 ohms full to 206 empty or something like that. So yeah, wasn't, this will never read 100. It'll read at 90 and then start going down from there. And even then, it's not super accurate because I've gotten down to like almost an empty tank and it was still saying about 11%. Not great. I think the fuel flow just gets stuck somewhere in the tank. It's not great. I've had to have that assembly out like a dozen times between 2 dead fuel pumps, dead fuel pressure regulator internally there, seal's not sealing. I also have to redo the seal on there now because I think the E85 actually finally ate away at the seal because at the last event it was leaking ever so slightly. I put some black duct tape around the assembly and it was fine, but the first round or two, not so great. You could splishy splashy some E85 under heavy braking down the straights. Not great. Yeah, things like that. There was a lot to learn. But overall, now that it seems to be running correctly, finally, I'm really ecstatic with it. It's a ton of fun. It needs a lot of refinement, and the next year is just going to be about gutting it, getting it down to regulation weight, and working my aero, because all of this stuff, this actually makes a huge difference. I'm gonna try and do something about the front bumper. I'm probably gonna go wider wheels to stretch the 255 a bit, even though they seem to be fine. The rear side skirts, and I'll probably cut the rear bumper to reduce drag. I'm also gonna try and remake that wing as a hollow core infused. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how much time I have, so on and so forth. Overall, and obviously I'm going to go ahead and dyno the car with the K-Power manifold, and then I'm also going to dyno with my ITB stack to see if and what real difference there was. It's interesting that I am seeing it peak asking for fuel at around 4,500 RPM, and then ask gradually less as it goes on, and then actually pull at $9,000. Now, there's other things like I'd like to clean this area up and make an air box for these ITBs. I'd like to move this over. I'd like to redo how I did the fuel line here. This is all kind of happenstance and a lot of just everything's always a moving target with this car because I wasn't 100% sure how the final plan was going to work out. What I'd like to do next is the hood. I'm going to skin a hood with just carbon fiber, 3 layers. Use my old hood that I still have, cut the skin off of that, cut up the inside so I can do a NACA duct here and feed the box, and then I'm also going to do a radiator cutout and probably a vent on this side to help alleviate some heat that this header definitely makes in general. There's supposed to be a stock heat shield here, but I couldn't fit it the way this is set up, so I would just like a nice vent there. And, you know, add a downforce. This is a big deal. I'll be doing, you know, some venting behind the bumper and whatnot, and trying to smooth out this bumper and getting rid of like all these open spots that no longer need to exist, since there is zero reason to be cooling my brakes. This is not a 500 horsepower car. This is going to be a 2550 with driver car. The stock brakes perform just fine actually with the Hawk pads I have. Granted, I did start feeling slightly soft on the pedal, but I have a feeling that's because the rear brakes are probably finally, yeah, they're shims. There's shims in there. Those are done. And I probably need some fresh fluid again. And I also think that this line right here probably is getting cooked by the header and causing a slight softiness. So things to kind of think about later and possibly redo that I probably will.